You are at the party. You were invited? You wanted to come? And somewhere around the 40-minute mark, you find yourself standing slightly to the left of a conversation that is happening without you, holding a drink you stopped tasting 20 minutes ago, watching everyone else seem to do the thing you cannot figure out how to do, which is just be there. Just exist in the room without feeling like you are watching it through glass. So you pull out your phone. Not because anyone texted, just because it gives your face something to point at. And later, on the drive home, or on the train, or alone in your room, you do the thing you always do. You replay it. You find the exact moment you said the slightly wrong thing. You catalog every silence that lasted a beat too long. You wonder what is wrong with you, why other people seem to plug into each other so effortlessly, while you are over there performing normalcy like it is a job you are not quite qualified for. And here is the part that really gets you. It is not like you hate people, you do not. Some of your best, most alive moments have been with one other person, talking at 2 in the morning about something real. You can be warm. You can be funny. You can connect. But in groups, at parties, in offices, in rooms full of people who all seem to know the unwritten rules, you feel like you got the manual everyone else was born with, but yours was printed in a language you cannot read. So you call yourself introverted, or socially anxious, or just weird. You say you prefer being alone, which is sometimes true, but not entirely. Because what you actually prefer is not being alone. What you prefer is not feeling like an outsider in rooms full of people. And those are not the same thing. You are not broken, but you are not just shy either. And the real explanation for what you feel is something almost nobody ever puts into words clearly. What you are experiencing has a name, and the name is not a diagnosis. It is not a flaw. It is a pattern that your brain learned probably a long time ago and has been running ever since so automatically that it feels like personality, but it is not. It is more like software. And software can be updated. The concept is called sensory processing sensitivity, and before you dismiss it as something soft, hear me out, because the neuroscience behind it is genuinely surprising. Sensory processing sensitivity, or SPS, describes a nervous system that processes information more deeply than average. And I mean that literally. The brain of someone high in this trait runs more detailed scans of every environment they enter. It catches more. It notices more. It processes more data per second than the average nervous system does. Researchers like Elaine Aron, who has spent decades studying this trait, estimate that somewhere between 15 and 20% of people are born with this kind of nervous system wiring. That means it is not rare. It is not a disorder. It is a genuine biological variation in how deeply a person processes their surroundings. Social cues, emotional tones, unspoken tensions, sensory input, the feeling in a room. Think of it this way. Imagine 2 people walk into the same party. Person A's brain takes a quick scan, captures the broad strokes, and files it. Crowded room, loud music, people talking. Fine. Person B's brain, which is probably more like your brain, runs a full forensic sweep. It notices the slightly forced laughter in the corner. It picks up the micro-expression on someone's face when they feel left out of a joke. It registers the exact social temperature of every cluster of people. It tracks who is performing comfort versus actually feeling it. Person A walks through the party. Person B is processing it in real time, in high definition, on every channel at once. That is an enormous amount of cognitive work. And the brain only has so much fuel. In last week's video, we talked about how the brain is essentially a prediction machine, constantly comparing what it expects to what it gets and spending energy on the gaps. For someone with a highly sensitive nervous system, every social environment is full of gaps. Full of signals to decode, possibilities to evaluate, outcomes to anticipate. The prediction engine is running at full speed, and you feel it as exhaustion, as the sense of being drained by things that seem effortless to everyone else, as that glass wall. But here is where it gets more specific. Because sensory processing sensitivity explains the depth of processing, it does not fully explain the outsider feeling. For that, we need to go one layer deeper into what is actually happening in the brain when you walk into a room and immediately feel like you do not belong. The structure we need to talk about is the amygdala. You have heard of it, probably. But let me tell you what it actually does in plain terms, because it matters here more than you might think. Your amygdala is your brain's threat detection system. It is a small, almond-shaped region buried deep in your brain, and its entire job is to scan your environment and ask one question: am I safe here? It does this before your conscious mind has any say in the matter. Before you decide how you feel about a room, your amygdala has already voted. For most people, Walking into a social gathering produces a mild amygdala response. A quick scan, no threat detected continue, for people with sensitive nervous systems who have had certain kinds of experiences, particularly in childhood. The amygdala learns to flag social environments as potentially dangerous, not in an obvious way, not in a you are about to be attacked way, in a subtler way. This room might reject you way. You might say something wrong way. These people might not really want you here way. And once the amygdala fires that signal, something interesting happens in the brain. The prefrontal cortex, which is the part of your brain that handles conscious thought, planning, language, and social navigation, gets partially hijacked. Not completely, but enough. Enough that your responses slow down slightly. Enough that you feel like you are watching yourself from a slight distance. Enough that the witty thing you wanted to say comes out half a second too late, or you second guess it and swallow it entirely, and then stand there feeling a different kind of foolish. This is not a character flaw. This is a brain that has learned to treat social environments as environments that require extreme vigilance. And vigilance and ease cannot coexist. They are neurologically incompatible. You cannot be scanning for threats and relaxing at the same time. The brain does not allow it. And here is where the cycle becomes vicious, and why it is so important to understand the mechanism rather than just blame yourself. When your amygdala treats the room as dangerous, you become guarded. When you are guarded, you engage less naturally. When you engage less naturally, you get slightly less positive social feedback from the people around you. Conversations feel slightly more effortful. Connections feel slightly harder to make. And your brain, which has been watching all of this, files it as evidence. Evidence that you were right to be on guard. Evidence that social environments are indeed difficult for you. Evidence that you are, in fact, somehow different from everyone else in the room. And then you go home and replay the evening, and the replay is not neutral. Your brain, still in its heightened state, focuses disproportionately on the moments that felt awkward, the silences that felt long, the times you felt unseen. It underweights the moments that went fine, the laughs that landed, the connections that were actually real. And it feeds all of that into the prediction it will make next time you are invited somewhere. Which is why it gets worse over time without intervention. Which is why avoidance, the thing that feels like relief, is actually what keeps the cycle running. You already know this, on some level. You have already tried the things people tell you to try. You have tried just pushing through it, going to the parties, putting in the appearances. And you went home feeling exactly the same way you always do, maybe worse because the expectation was there this time. You have tried thinking more positively, telling yourself you are fine, that everyone feels this way, that it is just nerves. And the thoughts do not stick because the feeling in your body does not believe them. You have tried being more outgoing, asking more questions, listening more actively, and felt like a person performing being a person, which is perhaps the loneliest feeling of all. Standard social advice almost always targets the wrong level. It targets behavior. Go out more, smile more, be more confident. But the outsider feeling is not a behavioral problem. It is a nervous system problem. And you cannot think your way out of a nervous system response. You cannot willpower your body into feeling safe in an environment that your brain has classified as threatening. What you can do is work from both directions. And that is exactly what the next section of this video is for. I want to give you 4 tools, not a 10-step program, not a philosophy, 4 specific, concrete things you can start using within the next 24 hours. And I am going to split them the way I always do, to that work top down, starting with your thoughts and beliefs, and to that work bottom up, starting with your body and your nervous system directly, because you need both. The mind alone cannot do this. The body alone cannot sustain it. They have to work together. The first tool is called the evidence audit. The problem it solves is this. Your brain is running a confirmation bias engine. It is collecting evidence for the belief that you do not belong and discarding the evidence that contradicts it. The evidence audit interrupts that engine deliberately. Here is the one action. After any social event where you felt like an outsider, open your Notes app before you do the replay. And before your brain starts finding the mistakes, force yourself to write down 3 moments, just 3, that were actually okay. Not transcendent. Not proof of belonging, just okay. A moment someone laughed at something you said. A moment of genuine eye contact. A conversation that did not feel painful. 3 moments. Then, below that, write down the story your brain is building about the event. Not because the story is wrong, but so you can see it as a story rather than fact. What this does in the brain is apply pressure to what neuroscientists call negativity bias, the well-documented tendency of the human brain to weight negative information more heavily than positive. Your amygdala-driven review system is not objective. It never has been. The evidence audit is not about lying to yourself. It is about giving your prefrontal cortex a fighting chance to participate in the debrief before your threat response finishes writing the verdict. The second top-down tool is called the role reframe. The problem it solves is the feeling of being on the outside of every social interaction, watching rather than participating, which itself creates more distance. Here is the action. Before you enter any social environment, give yourself a specific, concrete role, not a fake real one. Your role is the observer. Your job tonight is not to be liked. Your job is not to perform belonging. Your job is to notice one genuinely interesting thing about one person you speak to. One thing. What do they care about? What are they worried about? What is the gap between their performance and their reality? This works for two reasons. First, it removes the pressure of self-performance, which is what your amygdala is loading as the primary threat. When you are genuinely curious about someone else, you are not monitoring yourself. And when you stop monitoring yourself, your natural warmth and intelligence have room to emerge. Second, highly sensitive people are exceptionally good at reading beneath the surface. The role reframe is not fighting your nature. It is using it. It is pointing your processing power outward instead of inward. Before I give you the last two tools, I need to say something honest. The first few times you try these, they are going to feel fake. They are going to feel like you are playing a game rather than actually changing anything, and your brain is going to tell you that they are not working. It is going to say, "This is stupid. Nothing has changed. You still felt weird. This person on YouTube has no idea what your life is actually like." I need you to hear this clearly. That discomfort is not evidence that the tools are failing. It is evidence that your nervous system is encountering something genuinely new. Change in the brain, real neurological change, does not feel comfortable at first. It feels effortful and slightly absurd. The awkwardness is the process, not the problem. If it felt easy immediately, nothing would be changing. The third tool works directly on the nervous system, and it is called the threshold calibration. The problem it solves is that your amygdala currently treats all social environments as roughly equivalent threats. The big party, the work meeting, the one-on-one coffee, the family dinner, they all get flagged, but they are not equivalent. And your nervous system can learn to make finer distinctions, but only if you teach it gradually and deliberately. Here is the action. Make a simple list on paper. Write down every social situation you typically avoid or dread, from the one that feels least threatening to the one that feels most threatening. Then, for the next 2 weeks, only engage with the bottom 2 or 3 items on that list. Not the scary ones, the manageable ones. A coffee with one person you already like, a brief conversation with a neighbor, an event where you know at least 2 people. What you are doing is teaching your amygdala to update its threat assessment. The amygdala learns from repeated experience. Every time you enter a social environment and exit it without the catastrophe it predicted, you deposit a small piece of counter evidence into your nervous system's database. This process is called fear extinction in neuroscience, and it works slowly, cumulative, but genuinely. You are not pushing yourself until it hurts. You are systematically revising your brain's threat predictions from the bottom up. The fourth tool is called the anchor. The problem it solves is this: when your amygdala fires in a social situation, you lose access to the part of your brain that can regulate it. The prefrontal cortex goes offline at exactly the moment you need it most. The anchor is a way to bypass that. Here is the action. Right now, before you ever need it, choose one physical sensation to focus on in moments of social overwhelm. Your feet on the floor, the weight of your hands in your lap, 3 slow breaths where the exhale is twice as long as the inhale. Choose it now, practice it once a day for 2 minutes in a calm environment, and then use it as a circuit breaker in social situations. The reason this works is physiological. The extended exhale activates the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest system. The opposite of fight or flight, it literally signals your brainstem that the threat level has been downgraded. It does not fix the underlying pattern, but it creates a pause. A 2-second window where your prefrontal cortex can come back online and help you make a choice instead of just reacting. That window is everything. Now I need to make an important distinction because I would be doing you a disservice if I did not. Everything in this video assumes one specific thing. It assumes that the outsider feeling is a learned pattern that your nervous system developed in response to earlier experiences. And most of the time, for most people watching this, that is exactly what it is. A survival strategy that became a prison. A sensitivity that became a liability in social environments because it never got the right conditions to become a strength. But sometimes the outsider feeling is telling you something accurate. Sometimes you actually are in a group, a workplace, a friend's circle, or a family that does not have room for who you genuinely are. Sometimes the people around you actually are indifferent, or subtly unkind, or operating from values that are incompatible with yours. And in those cases, the feeling of not belonging is not a misfire. It is a signal. It is your nervous system correctly identifying a mismatch. If you have done the genuine work of trying, of showing up, being honest, being curious, extending yourself, and the feeling of not belonging persists in one specific environment while it lifts in others, pay attention to that difference. The work in this video is about healing patterns that follow you everywhere. It is not about making yourself smaller to fit into spaces that were never built for you. If that is where you are, if this is less about your brain and more about your circumstances, the right move is not more internal work. It is finding your people. And that is a different video for a different day. For now, here is something you can say to yourself the next time the outsider feeling starts, not because words fix everything, but because the right words, said in the right moment, can interrupt an automatic cycle long enough for you to choose. Say this: my brain is scanning for danger because it learned that social environments are dangerous. That learning made sense once. It is not a fact about who I am. It is a habit my nervous system built under pressure. I am noticing it right now, which means I am not inside it. I can be uncomfortable and stay. I can be unseen and still be here. I do not need this room to confirm my worth. I am learning a new skill, and new skills feel awkward before they feel natural. This is the awkward part. It is working. Here is the truth about you, said plainly. You are not naturally an outsider. That is not some core fact of your existence that you have to accept and work around. What you are is someone with a nervous system that processes the world at a depth that most people never reach. That depth is not the problem. The problem is that nobody ever taught you how to carry it, how to regulate it, how to be in a room full of people without it flooding you. You built the outsider feeling because you had to. Because at some point, staying on the edge of the room felt safer than being in the middle of it and getting it wrong. That was a reasonable thing to build. It protected you. But it is not protecting you anymore. It is costing you the very connection your sensitive brain is actually wired to go deep in. And slowly, with the right tools and the right understanding, you are safe enough now to start letting it go. If any of this landed for you, there is one more pattern I want to examine with you soon. Because the outsider feeling often has a partner, and that partner is the way certain people, particularly the ones with this kind of sensitive wiring, respond when they finally do feel seen by someone. The way connection, when it finally arrives, can become its own source of anxiety. We are going to look at why closeness can feel threatening even when it is exactly what you wanted. And if that sounds uncomfortably familiar, the next video was made for you.